Well, it's so funny because I just did a bunch of these with execs at reInvent.
Yeah.
Where I was like the voice that then ended up on the cutting floor.
Yeah.
Prompting them with questions. And
Yeah.
I was like, but you need to paraphrase the question into your answer because I'm not on the video, right? Like I'm cueing you, but I'm not going to be
And I feel
seen.
like, in my experience, so for example, I've done 40 of these. We've never had to stop in the middle.
All right.
I feel like if people know that you can and we're going to do it, they do
Yeah.
it. And if they feel like, hey, we're live, you can't do it, they don't do it.
And
so.
how long do you?
Anywhere from like 15 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
pretty short. But so anyways, I was going to tell you, my nephew just enlisted in the Army, and he's going to college, and so he's, I think he just did his first semester of freshman year of college in Ohio. He just enlisted. He's going to go to boot camp in May, and then he'll go back to college and do ROTC.
Well, and then he goes in as an officer and makes more money.
He's got his full college paid for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like he was going to look at massive, debt.
Yeah.
Now he has no debt. He's going to get paid to go to school.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
well,
like,
Jack will have that. So he took the money my parents did for all the grandkids. He took that and bought a rental property in Milwaukee.
Oh, wow.
So he's a landlord, and he just bought a duplex. So he's got a house and a duplex.
He's going to be more successful than half these kids coming out of school.
He's making money.
Yeah.
And he's got a property manager, so he doesn't have to deal with it.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
That's very cool. See, and was he raised in the city?
He did.
There you go, right?
Yeah. Went to public school for elementary school, but then Catholic school for middle school and high school.
That's the challenge. I have friends that just moved to the city and they have young kids, and it's like, they're a little worried. Like, they're not worried for like elementary and middle school, but they're a little worried for the high school. Like, what high school do they end up in? And
I didn't want the middle school that was like walking distance from our house because of the feeder schools.
Yeah.
But they're going away less from the busing to more local.
Okay.
But it also goes from like 300 kids in elementary school to like 1,200 in middle school, and I was like, no, not a chance.
That's tough.
But the high school Jack went to was all boys, and now it's co-ed, and they have like a biomed program, they have an engineering program, they have a resource program.
At the school? Mm-hmm. Wow.
And the resource, so like kids with dyslexia.
We just had like shop and like gardening, and we didn't have that cool stuff.
They have that. They have shop too.
Yeah. Do they still have shop?
Yeah.
I was surprised,
Yeah. His elementary school had gardening.
So you lived in the city your entire career in terms of working in tech and marketing then?
Yeah, I spent a year and a day in Chicago.
Yeah, okay.
For Oracle, and then
Where in downtown Chicago?
right in the Gold Coast.
Oh, I did 3.
Dearborn and Elm.
I did 3 years in downtown Chicago.
Yeah, I going from the beach to Chicago.
I loved it.
I did a year and a day.
It was fun.
Yeah, I did a year.
The winters are a little rough.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a fun town.
Yeah, and then they moved me here, so then I've been here ever since.
So you've seen the whole Silicon Valley ride and tech rise, and now we're going through this AI boom, and you've been in the heart of it this whole time.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm actually getting over it now at this point in my maturity.
Well, I mean, it's changed so much. I mean, I remember the height of the buses, with the height of Google and Facebook and moving the buses in and out of the city, and now, to the COVID, where you walk around a Tuesday downtown and it looks dead out, and it's just so much change over those years.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I think kind of the tech landscape is changing. Number one, AI, but tech has always changed the landscape, but also, this whole, you have to be in an office.
Yeah.
And I mean, I worked remote starting back in 2000, 8, because I worked for Cisco, which is down in the Silicon Valley. And then I was working with people in Europe and India.
Yeah.
Because I had global. Well, I did calls at 6 a.m. I'm not driving to an office to sit in a room to take a conference call.
Yeah.
When nobody I worked with was actually in that office. So I've been working remote since Cisco launched WebEx,
Wow.
which I don't remember when that was, but
Yeah.
so like I did hybrid long before hybrid was even a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think every organization's trying to figure it out now. And one thing I always think about now with these kids coming out of college and into the workforce is like I love working from home. I love also visiting an office, but I feel like working from home, I've had the benefits of growing up and learning
In an office.
in an office,
Yeah,
right? And
they
so I
need,
carry
they
that.
need that to networking and
Yeah, and I feel bad for these kids going straight to remote work because they're missing all the benefits I got from an office
well,
that I take home.
they think it's great for them because then they can like work from Tahoe or work from
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm just going to move to San Diego and work from there. It's like, okay, but that's great for your social life, but I mean, I like the flexibility, because I'll
Sure.
have a meeting in the middle of the day,
Yeah.
which means code for go play tennis,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I know I can get my work done.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is, I think, a lot of why at this point in my career, doing the freelance contract is good for me.
Yeah, and that's so much of what I want to talk about today is the contract side of things, because I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about it. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people doing contract work, especially in the partner marketing space, but I don't know anything about what they actually do and what it's like and how they got in it. So why don't you talk a little bit more just from like the 10,000-foot view of, your role. I mean, you're a contractor. What does that mean?
So, I was working as a full-time employee and was part of, mass reorg. And so opportunistically, one of the partners that I had invited into marketing program that I was running at the time for Microsoft, I reached out to the person that I had a good relationship with and who managed the relationship for that company. And I said, hey, I'm going to get laid off. And he's like, oh, we want you. So he went to the director of marketing and said, we need to bring Dena on. Mm-hmm. So the goal was to bring me on as a contractor till the start of their new fiscal year and then convert me to full-time. And they really wanted me to continue the work that I had started for them at Microsoft around sustainability, but then also help them really build and grow what a partner marketing program needed to look like from, how do you manage MDF? How do you tier like the level of sponsorship or tiered like the level of the partners, because not all partners are created equally.
Yeah.
How do you work with global system integrator versus ISV partners? I'm really kind of understanding like sales enablement with those partners. How do you bring solutions, co-develop solutions to market? What does that look like? So I was kind of talk about it as like the foundational marketing, but there's also like building out a repeatable partner marketing program. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and then unfortunately, they went through budget cuts and reorgs, which is kind of a lot of what was happening in 2023. And so that gig ended, but then through relationships I had with former colleagues, I was able to get like my next contract gig. And so, some people form like an LLC, and I explored that of where there's a lot of companies that help partners know how to partner with the big hyperscalers.
Okay.
And how to navigate incentives and things like that. And so I talked to some guys that I knew that had started a business about being their marketing arm. But at the end of the day, they took my plan and went a cheaper route. But, which like to me is like, but they did it to a few other people that I had relationships with that I talked to. But I kind of made the decision that I didn't want to like go down all the depths of creating an LLC and be standalone. So the way that I worked it is the companies I've worked for have like staffing agencies when they need like temporary work to like cover maternity leave or, like special project management. So I'm an employee of their particular staffing agency. which is just, they're basically a payroll provider for me.
Yeah.
So they didn't source me in these circumstances. You know, I came through like contacts that I had. You know, and having been in partner marketing for almost 30 years, you have a lot of those relationships, right?
Yeah. And what are like kind of the pros and cons doing your own LLC versus going through like a staffing agency or?
Well, if you're LLC, like what I was able to explore was there's insurance potential requirements, creating like separate banking.
You're running a business, essentially.
You're running a business. And, you know, when I was talking to these guys about being their marketing arm, you know, they wanted me to carry all the paper. So if I was going to bring an agency to do some content development, they wanted me to have that like PO with that agency. And so it would be like I'd have to pay the agency, then I'd have to submit my bill to them, and then they'd have to pay me. And I didn't want to take all that personal exposure. So that's just, I think, different people. I know I have friends that I've worked with that I've brought in as contractors when I was like at Cisco that have had their own business for 25 plus years. So it's just more of what your personal choice is and how you want to structure it. So
I want to ask you kind of the early days, what attracted you to partner marketing and maybe a little bit more of your time at Microsoft. First, a couple personal questions. I have a little rapid fire round so people get to know you. 4 questions, all right?
Okay.
All right. Do you like to type or voice text?
I think I'm a balance of both. If I'm driving, I voice text, right? Because don't text and drive. But I'm a master like typing.
Okay.
But my son would probably laugh at like which fingers I use to do it because I'm not a two-handed texter.
I only voice text, and I just learned like kids these days don't voice text at all, and I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, kids don't do that, and I'm like, what?
Well, I think if you're driving, that's what you do. But I also feel like some of the voice text message that I've sent people are like really, really bad. And I mean like using like, Teams or I don't know, I don't use Zoom very often, but like the transcription, like the AI transcription is not there yet, right? So it's like voice texting, you get a lot of weird and you just hope that somebody actually figures it out what you're trying to tell them or ask them.
All right, favorite dessert?
Not a dessert person.
No? Okay.
How about a glass of rosé sparkling?
Yeah, a little dessert wine.
I'll drink my dessert.
Love it. All right, if you could travel to the past or the future, what would you do?
I'd probably go past because I don't know that I could wrap my arms around what like, the long future is going to look like from a tech and perspective.
Love it. All right. My last question, you already kind of answered. It was favorite way to take a break from work, and I think it's to play tennis.
Play tennis.
We got it. All right. Well, thanks for doing that. So your time at Microsoft, I think you mentioned before this that before, when you and I talked last week, you were doing a partner marketing role with VCs or private equity. Was that right? How is that different than working with hyperscalers and ISVs? Like, what was that?
Yeah. So it was interesting. When I interviewed at Microsoft, I was interviewing at the same time for 2 different roles. And one was to manage a large partner relationship, which was already established, and so it was kind of just maintaining. And then the other role was this new blank sheet of paper where Microsoft wanted to work with private equity and venture capital organizations to reach in to get access to their late stage SaaS companies, that to get them, number one, to build their solution on Azure, because a lot of the startups build on AWS because AWS throws a lot of money at them. That's just kind of like a generalization, but so really getting them to be multi-cloud or cloud agnostic. And so that was part of the motion, but then the other motion was also then to get them to become part of the Microsoft partner ecosystem. So first off, their solution has to run on Azure because it's all about Azure consumption, consumption commitments.
Yeah.
And so the goal was to get them to build on Azure and then become part of the partner program and sign what they call MAC agreements, which are, like huge, like Azure consumption commitments. And so it was a really different motion because it was more about kind of recruit, and it wasn't kind of the day-to-day management of partners either by solution area like security or biz apps, or by industry, which was what all of my other peers were doing. So it just required a lot of thinking outside the box, navigating like different groups within Microsoft to kind of run compelling campaigns targeting those companies. And like there's a big conference that happens here called Sastra that's all about startups. And because of COVID, they actually did it in the San Mateo Fairgrounds. So it was like an outside conference, which actually was kind of cool than being like at Moscone or or Vegas, right? So we ran that program. They made a lot of changes to the program, and then they asked me to take another sheet of blank paper and create a sustainability strategy. So Microsoft had launched its Cloud for Sustainability, and so they wanted to look across the partner ecosystems of what partners had sustainability solutions built on Azure, that then we could build scalable campaigns to really get them in market, help promote the Cloud for Sustainability. And so there weren't any systems of record that were tagging for sustainability, so it was a lot of, spreadsheets, talking to partners, figuring out what was what, and then I, worked with an agency. We built some scalable campaigns. We pitched them to the partner development folks. Then we pitched them to the partners, got their buy-in, got them to put some skin in the game, and launch these campaigns. And then that was the work that I took when I left Microsoft to this partner that they are like, we love this campaign. We want to continue the campaign in North America, but we want to scale it to the UK, Ireland, Germany. We want to, what I call, industryize the campaign and add a higher ed flavor to it and run that in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So that's kind of one of the things that I really pride myself on, is really building programs that can scale geographies into other like industries, and can scale across like multi-partners. Because back in the day when I started in partner at Cisco, I was managing like a global partner relationship, so like a Cisco IBM relationship or a Cisco Intel, and we did really one-to-one customization. There's not the luxury of having that many partner marketing people at companies now, and so most of the time you're managing like an ecosystem of partners in, say, a particular industry, so a group of manufacturing partners or a group of banking financial service focused partners, or security solution partners. So you need to be able to build programs that can scale across different partners and then work to add their unique value prop and positioning.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about that in terms of the key, building blocks to building a scalable, repeatable program. If you're going into somewhere and you got a blank sheet of paper and you got to build a repeatable, scalable program, like how do you start? What best practices would you incorporate? Like what advice do you have?
Yeah, so I have my go-to agencies I always turn to that I've brought to all the different companies that I've been at, even when I'm contracting, because I trust them. I know what their capabilities are. So I think finding those solid marketing partners, agencies that you can work with, because not all organizations can do everything in-house.
Right.
You have to build that foundational content or leverage existing foundational content, and then add that partner's unique value proposition. So what is their market differentiation? What solutions are they bringing? And add that into that foundational content. And everybody thinks, oh, that's super easy. But in a lot of cases, you could take white out and put one partner's name and then white that out and put another partner's name, that don't very well articulate their market differentiator. And so, like at Cisco, that was a lot of work that I did when it's like the 1 + 1 = 3 of why Cisco and IBM versus a Cisco and an Accenture versus a Cisco and a KPMG.
That sounds hard to scale, though, if you're not just doing that whiteout swap, but actually incorporating that unique value prop. Like, how do you scale that?
Well, back then, it wasn't me doing it for all those partners, right? Like, it's important that the partner understands that and can bring that.
So it goes both ways then.
Yeah,
you need
they have to have that narrative baked themselves, because they're out there competing every day, not just in the one area that maybe the campaign that I'm developing is focused on. Like that's their business, right? Like they need to be able to differentiate themselves in the marketplace.
Yeah, makes sense. I want to ask you in terms of one challenge I constantly keep hearing these days is the disconnect with sales teams or BDR teams, specifically within strategic partnerships. What advice do you have for working with sales teams and helping them embrace these partner leads that are coming their way?
Okay, were you on my 7:30 call this morning? Because I'm like, not doing anything is not doing anything, right? Like you got to start somewhere. I think, and it's a problem. It's like across the board, right?
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the parking lot on a call, with a partner, and having the same conversation of, we don't know if what's been put in his pipeline, if it's real, like or vaporware. And the problem is if you put it into like the co-sell platform with a hyperscaler, and it's not real, then the sales guys are never gonna accept any other opportunities because like garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
I think number one, the big thing is kind of knowing where it's marketing's role, and then it becomes sales, right? Like I can't fix their like lack of follow-up or their, like lack of having relationships. And it's making sure that leadership understands that. So I think, number one, if you're launching a campaign, is making sure you brief them so they know this is what's coming. I did a briefing for a campaign I'm launching where it's a two-touch that then we're sending real-time lead alerts to the associated seller. And we track how long it takes them to follow up. So it's like Big Brother is going to be watching. Making sure that they're armed with, here's a sample email that you can personalize and use in your initial outreach once you get that lead, right? And know that it's a marketing qualified lead, but it's not a sales qualified lead. That's their job. And so, sharing, the qualification, if there's telequalifying that comes with that lead, making sure they understand, here's all the answers to the BANT questions. So you can actually have like a thoughtful conversation with this person. But it takes more than I sent an email and they never responded.
Right.
Like I used the example of you're not selling a box of Girl Scout cookies, right?
Yeah.
Like you're selling multi-million-dollar, multi-year engagements. So it takes a little bit more than that. Are you connected to that contact on LinkedIn? Are you trying to call that person? Are you inviting them to different events that are, we're potentially hosting? But ultimately, the partner account people within the organization need to work with, the security sellers within the organization who need to potentially work with the global account people within the organization. And then, by the way, you have to work with the associated partner salespeople. And so that's all about that relationship building.
Yeah.
But it's not marketing's job to fix that. And we can appointment set for you, but then you need to actually really follow up on that appointment and take that appointment, because otherwise, you're just going to alienate people. So it's a problem. I think that it's not one organization's problem.
I love that these are just some tangible solutions I took away from it, because I talked to a lot of people that are frustrated with it, but I'm not sure they're doing anything about it. And the BDR briefings, the sample emails, I think those are tangible action items that other people hopefully listen to this can start to think about. It's not my job, but maybe there are certain things that I can be doing to set them up for success.
Yeah, I think it's like going to events. To me, events don't generate leads. It's contact acquisition.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I was managing the Oracle relationship for Cisco, we were at Oracle Open World, and part of planning that, I said, okay, but what's the call to action after the event, right? Because the event is the event. We're scanning badges. Maybe the person wanted the T-shirt, I don't. And so, as part of the planning of our presence at the event, in parallel, we were planning a 3-part webinar series that, when we sent a thank you for coming by our booth, we were inviting them to this 3-part webinar series, on different topics that we had showcased as part of our presence there. So having those calls to action built into the planning, especially for events, I think is also really important. So that you're creating kind of a multi-touch journey out of campaigns or from events or whatever.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, kind of as we round out this conversation, you've done a lot of work with hyperscalers. Challenges, best practices, what can you share in terms of advice of working with hyperscalers to maximize, your efforts? All of the hyperscalers, from my perspective, they all have different personalities, right? But they're also all about co-sell and co-sell opportunities, right? And cloud consumption. And so, but then there's also all the different solution areas that you're working with them on. So it's not just about cloud, right? So I think, prioritizing the business, making sure, I get asked a lot of, oh, well, where's the marketing plan? And my thing is, well, where's the business plan that I can build a marketing plan to support the business? Because marketing is not the tail that wags the dog, right? And so you need to really have those strategic commitments, have the business plan, and to be able to build a solid marketing plan and execute against that. One of the conversations I had was, well, we may not need to do lead gen. We may need to change what marketing is doing, to do POCs and things like that. And I'm like, well, that comes out of a different bucket versus MDF. And it's not really marketing's job to plan POCs. That's on the technical side. It can be an offer. What's a POC, by the way?
A proof of concept.
Proof of concept, yep. Okay.
It can be an offer as part of what we're marketing.
Yeah.
But and so it's also understanding, stay in your swim lane a little bit.
Yeah.
And not overcommit that like marketing owns everything.
So do you feel like when working with the hyperscalers, a lot just gets dumped on the marketer's plate, and there almost needs to be set up some boundaries
Yeah, it's
here
like
and
like there's
expectations?
okay, data and AI, and then there's cloud, and then there's security, and then and then there's all these niche industry solutions. It's like, okay, like how do I as an individual?
Yeah.
I can't manage marketing across the globe for all these different strategic initiatives, right?
Right.
So it's also making sure that the business understands what's realistic too.
Yeah.
And that's where like the sales people need to be doing their piece. Otherwise, you're just doing marketing for the sake of doing marketing. And if the leads are just stagnating, because you sent an email and the person didn't buy the box of cookies, like okay, well,
Despite all the challenges, do you love it? You love what you're doing?
I mean, I've been in partner marketing for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think why I'm passionate about partner is, you work with a lot of different people across different organizations. So you're always looking out. And I also think what I've seen over the years is that, companies are looking for new streams of revenue and, putting big aspirational goals of, we want to get to, X number of revenue by 2020, it used to be 2025, now it's like 2030. And they realize they can't do that on their own.
Yeah.
And so partner is really like the new revenue streams for organizations as they want to grow.
Yeah, I just had Megan Moore from ServiceNow in right before you, and she was saying that, they want to take ServiceNow from 10 to 20 billion, and partners are their path to do that.
Yeah.
And I know I've talked to Zscaler and a number of other organizations, same thing.
Yeah.
But with that comes a lot of expectations and its own challenges.
Well, and I think that's where it creates like a market for me, where they're aspirational to do it, but maybe they don't have the head count.
Yeah.
But they can bring, a contractor in to help kind of initiate or kickstart that.
Yeah.
As they're kind of like figuring out the business model to grow that partner.
So if someone's thinking about becoming a contractor, like what are some things that you would suggest they think about before they just jump right in?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are in your professional career. Like do you want to be like run your own business, right? So then it's like the nature of an LLC, and what's the business model going to be? Do you need insurance? You got to create a separate bank account potentially, and then finding the work, right?
Yeah.
I've been in the business for so long, and I have so many connections, right? I prefer to be on a staffing agency just because it's simpler. Mm-hmm. Health insurance, right? Like, I'm able to be on my husband's health insurance, right? So you kind of have to think of all that, but it's also finding your next gig, right? Because, there's also, I think, rules of how long you can stay on as a contractor within organizations, because of like rules around, that you're not, converting someone to an FTE. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I know there was some of that when I was at Cisco where people were contractors for like 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, we can't do that anymore. But I think the biggest thing is just finding the work, and then also like figuring out what your hourly rate is. Because I get in-mails all the time for like, oh, can you cover a mat leave, or we have this contract job. And what a lot of them that I've received, I'm like, yeah, that's so below what my hourly rate is.
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
What are they offering in terms of what you see as too low hourly rate?
Well, I think it depends on where you are
Yeah.
in your career. I mean, I've seen anywhere from, $50 to, 150 plus, right?
Mm-hmm. So big range then.
Yeah, it's a big range,
Okay.
and so it just depends on your
Where
experience
you are
and
in
where
your
you are
career.
professionally,
Yeah.
and
I think that's helpful, kind of knowing like what those.
where you live, maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables.
Yeah.
And and that range exists, across big enterprise companies that are bringing contractors in, to probably smaller organizations.
Yeah. Well, this has been cool. I've learned a lot about contracting, but even more than that, just like the scalable programs, working with hyperscalers, the PE, VC stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
One more question before we go, and that's just what piece of advice do you want to leave with people on the road?
Well, I love working with partners. I think it's it gets me up in the morning. It keeps me engaged. Again, contracting isn't for everybody, because you always need to be maintaining relationships and trying to, knowing that, I mean, a full-time job could end, a contract job could end. So, being able to find that next opportunity, is you always kind of have to have your pulse.
Yeah.
And maintaining those like professional connections. I think LinkedIn is a great tool. I mean, you can sign up for like the LinkedIn alerts so you can kind of see what's out there from jobs. I think there's also where I keep seeing same jobs getting reposted all the time. So it's kind of like, is this real or not real, right? Or, or with AI now, it's like, well, after deep consideration, we've chosen to go someone else. It's like, I just submitted the job application like 3 minutes ago.
Wow.
Like, so there's not a lot of deep consideration going into that.
It's probably where your network connections come into play, right?
Exactly.
So that's so important. So, well, thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
for
on.
having
Dena.
me.
It's
Yeah, I
great.
appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yep.
Thank you.